Hi everyone, my name is King IV and this is Introduction to Audit Command Language. This is the second lesson. In the previous lesson we would have covered off, I would have just walked you through the ACL application, and today we'll be walking through how to actually import data. And in this lesson we're going to cover over the basic file formats, so importing Excel documents, importing CSVs, importing text documents, and importing an Access database. Those are probably the most common ones you're going to run into. There are opportunities to import PDFs or report file formats, which I'll cover it off in a special lesson. And then there's also an opportunity to connect through ODBC connection. But let's just get started. So hopefully everyone has the files downloaded. They're the standard ACL files that are included in a standard ACL package. But let's get started. So let's go to new projects, and I just have it in a folder. And your file format structure should be that you have data, and then I have results. That's just the format that I like to use. I like to keep it consistent. That way I can continuously use different scripts and different file formats, just so that it's just good to have a good structure. So I'm going to call this, you want your title to be descriptive without being too long. So I'm just going to call this Tutorial Analytics. So now it's saved. Just opened up on my other monitor. So you're gonna have a format like this. So before we get started on the importing, I'm gonna show you the standard file format that we want to use. So you would have saw this if you looked at the demo side. So we're gonna use new, and we're gonna go folder, and we're gonna call this. I usually use 3 standard folders for this, so I call it scripts. I'm going to call it tables, and this just helps you keep organized. And being organized is super important in this line of work, because you're going to get a lot of different tables and a lot of information. You just want to make sure that, one, it's readable and usable for yourself. So if you were to go away for a week or work on several different projects, you're able to pick it up very easily, but also for other people to pick it up, because you're going to be sharing your scripts, sharing your work. So you want to make sure that they understand what's happening. So you have 3 folders: scripts, tables, workspaces. And what we're going to do here under scripts is we're going to right click the scripts folder, and we're going to go new, and we're going to call it scripts. We're going to click on scripts. And then what this does is it opens up a new scripting language. So I know scripting, especially if you're starting out with, if this is your first analytics software besides Excel, it may look a little bit intimidating, but have no fear. It's going to be really easy to pick up, and you'll see that really the challenging part is not so much the scripting or knowing the technical language, which is very important, but the challenge is more so being creative and coming up with a solution using these appropriate tools. So the hard part is not using a hammer or knowing how to use a hammer. It's when to use it at the right time, or what tool to use at the right time. So you're gonna have a open canvas here, and we're gonna right click the new script, or you could double click. We're gonna click on rename, and let's just call this tutorial. Perfect. So let's leave that for now. Let's right click tables, and we're going to new, and we're going to go tables. There's many different ways. You could also go file, new, tables. You could also go data, external, disk. But in this case, this is the format I like to use, because then it's going to load into, it's going to get imported into this folder. Let's click on tables, and what you'll see here, local or ACL server. If you don't utilize ACL server, I think they call it ACL Exchange, then obviously you're never going to go to this file format. So we're going to click on next, and then there's disk, ODBC, and external definition. So we walked through that briefly yesterday when we went to, not yesterday, during the previous lesson when we went to data. This case, 99% of the time you're going to use disk when you start out. So click on next. And what we're going to do is we want to go to the data folder here, right? So hopefully everyone has the data there. And the first file format that we're going to import, let's start with the easiest one. So let's start with Excel. Excel, and you're going to see there's different options and different capabilities available for each of the different reports. So we're going to click on Excel. So we're going to click on the employee may with CCN. So we want to just double click it. And then it's automatically going to choose what file format it thinks it's best. But obviously, if it's wrong, then you should update it. And there's several different ones. So Access Database is pretty straightforward. ACPAC master file. So ACPAC is an accounting system mostly for smaller to medium-sized organizations. DBase compatible file format. So obviously for DBase files, that's I believe that's an IBM database one that supports like its mainframe environment, but obviously correct me if I'm wrong. Delimited text files, so obviously text files that are where each of the columns are separated by a certain value. Most common ones are going to be commas or tabs, and obviously Excel files, PDFs, print image reports. So this is when if they export using Crystal reports or some kind of reporting software, you'll see that. SAP format, XBRL 2.1 file. I haven't had the greatest luck with XBRL or file formats, but that's obviously an option as well. XML options are also very good. A little bit tricky to work with, so if you're a beginner, I wouldn't really recommend it. And then other file formats, and that's really where you just go and define the features yourself. So we're gonna click on next because Excel is the correct one. And then it's going to show a bunch of tabs. And what I'd recommend is sometimes you're going to see the tab names show up twice. The only difference is that there's going to be a dollar sign in front. I recommend putting the dollar sign in front, not in front, at the end. I recommend using that one because I find that one's mostly the correct one. I'm not sure if it's because Excel caches like the original file format, so I just find it's most useful there. Use first row as field names. So if you don't obviously have field names, then don't click on here because it's going to lead to misleading formats. But if your file does have top row as field names, which define the column, then obviously check this. And then detect type and length based off of first 100 records or entire worksheet or name range. So it's also going to show name ranges as well. So if you have name ranges defined there, it's going to pick it up. I always click entire Excel worksheet or name range, and I know sometimes the files are very large and they're gonna take they may take several minutes to load. But what I find is doing the entire Excel worksheet or name range is going to make sure that you have the appropriate length for each field. And what you don't want to happen, and what you don't want to do, is save 30 seconds and realize that at the beginning, the longest number length was 10 digits. But then further down on the data, it was 13 digits. There was one with 13 digits. And you're wondering why your numbers don't tie up, or you have misleading results, or you're not catching that outlier. So it's, in my opinion, the more responsible method to click on entire worksheet or name range. So essentially, this first 100 records, it basically scans through the 100 and determines what the length and the record type it should be. Let's go next. Not record type, column type. So what you'll see here is it's automatically inputted the first column's names here. And what you'll see here is a couple different options. Ignore this field. So I don't recommend clicking ignore this field because if you're using in scripts, what will happen is you click on ignore this field. At least this is I almost never click this, but at least this is what's happened to me previously. You click on there, click ignore this field, you save your import, you rerun it. Because in the import it doesn't have ignore, then it's not going to actually ignore the field. So then you're going to have it next time you actually run it. So I don't really recommend it. I recommend that you adjust your script accordingly, or not adjust your source data, because I don't really like to manipulate source data. That's also a big advantage for ACL as opposed to using Excel, is that you don't get these what we call fact fingering errors, where you've made a mistake or you've manipulated the source data. Here you put it into this environment where you actually can't manipulate the source data. All you can do is create new extracts or new tables from it. So anyways, what you're going to see here is the name of the field. So you can rename it as you see fit. You're gonna see the length. You can also have a column title if you want. I almost never fill that in. And what you'll see here in Excel, there are three basic types. So text are like things that you would categorize by. And first name, very straightforward. It makes sense that first name is text. Like you probably knew that before you even listened to this lesson. But things like employee number, for example, is not inherently obvious that it's text because it actually contains numbers. You might think, for example, that it should be numeric because it has numbers, but you only make columns numeric if you're willing to add two of the values together. So for example, am I willing to add 8 and 60 employee number and actually make it some meaningful information? The answer for that question is no. Another one you can do is, are you willing to perform a mathematical function on that field? So I'm not willing to perform Layla or Leela and times that by 2 because that wouldn't make any sense. And same thing with the employee number. So if you're not willing to perform a mathematical function, then I recommend putting it as text. And the last one is date time. So if you're using ACL 10 below 10, so like 9.3, 9.2, 9.1, it's gonna just have date. Don't be too concerned about that. Just obviously date time will also include hours, minutes, and seconds. It actually kind of annoys me that they didn't make an option for date and time and date time, just because it results in some compatibility issues between the new versions of ACL and old versions. But nonetheless, so we're gonna leave those as text files. And then card numbers, you'll see here it actually mislabeled this. So card number is a categorizing file, so it should be text. Same thing with there. And then what you'll see here, date time, it'll include the mask. So you're gonna see, or they call it input format here in IDEA, which is another software that I cover. It's called a mask, but nonetheless. So basically, what it does is shows you. You're basically saying like, how can you look at this column and determine what's actually what value? So the Y's represent the years, the M represent the month, and then the D's represent the days. So if you had, for example, let's pull it up in Excel. If you had, for example, March 30th, 2014. Oh, not 204. 2014, then you would want your file format to be MMM space DDD YYY. If you had it so that it was 1030, or let's use the same one, 0330 2014, then obviously you want it MMM slash DDD slash YYYY. So you just basically wanted to have it the same file format there, so you can ACL will know. So obviously you can see the value as well. And then salary here. So salary is numeric. What I normally do for dollar value ones, even if I know that salary is only 0 decimal places, I always put it to 2 just in case. And you'll also see later on when you actually go and create new fields, it's always going to default it to the lowest number of decimal places between all the different variables in the function. So if I multiply salary times growth rate of 10%, for example, it's always going to, and salary 0 decimal places is always going to make the result 0 decimal places, whatever the lowest one is. And then bonus, the same thing. I just like to put it to 2 decimal places, just because like most currency value ones are 2 decimal places. So once you're happy with that, you're gonna click on next. And then what you're going to do is going to ask you to save the .fil file. And the .fil file is basically the ACL storage of the data. And that's how ACL is going to interact with the table format that it's laid out for, the table layout format it's laid out for this table, and with the ACL project. So what I highly recommend, and please do not make this mistake, is that you don't save your .fil files in the same folder as your data folder, because what's going to happen is, for example, this one is employee credit card data. Actually, this is the employee credit card data. Let me show you what it looks like. So here, this is the employee credit card data. If you save this and with a very similar file name, it's basically going to create another file that's a .fill file, and then it becomes confusing on when you import other files, like which one do you need to import, which one you haven't imported. So what I recommend is that you save it on the same level as your ACL project, which is usually one level up from your data format. So what I like to do when I import source files is I like to start it with an underscore. That way, and I try to encourage other people to do that way. That way, when you open up another person's ACL project, you see all the underscore files. Okay, those are the files that even without looking at the script, I know that these ones are source file, and that they're not created extracts, they're not joins, they're not relations, they're not mergers of files, etc., etc. So let's call this employee underscore May. Something simple, so that you can tell what it is. Press save, and then what it's going to do is provide you a quick preview. So what the source of the file is, the character types, so ASCII in this case, record length, number of skip length, so don't worry about those ones, number of fields, and then here's what you really want to focus on. So these different data types depends on what type of ACL you might have. It might say Unicode, for example, so don't worry too much. As long as it roughly looks like this, you should be fine. I just want to take a quick look here just to make sure that you didn't make any egregious errors. So you're going to click on finish, and then what's going to ask you here, it's going to ask you to name the table layout, and this is basically the table within ACL program. Press OK. And what you'll see here is now you have the table saved here. It's saved under this table format. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go log. So log is basically, this is one of the beauties of a program like ACL, is that it basically records all your actions. So you can see here, we've renamed the script. We've also imported. So sometimes it won't actually log the renaming of the script. Depends on what version of ACL you're using. It also keeps track of the import history, of opening the table subsequently afterwards. So what you want to do is click on here, and if you don't have the command line open, go to Window, make sure the command line is checked off, and then what I recommend doing is just click once. You can either double click, sometimes that works for people, sometimes it doesn't, or press Control A, Control C, go to your script, press enter twice so it's on the third line, and just paste it here. And you'll see a benefit of why you would want to paste it. So then the benefit of you pasting is, say for example, you accidentally delete this, and you're like, oh no, now I've lost my file. Like, what am I gonna do? No, never fear, because you saved the import. What you can do here is click on this run, or right click run. So I like to do here, and then what I'll do is I'll automatically import it again. And then what I also like to do, so let's just set this script up. So let's go first line. I like to do close, and what close does is it closes the primary table that's open. So you see that now there's no longer the employee file open. And then what I like to do is here close secondary, and close secondary will make way more sense once we cover joins, and it's basically the secondary table. Now we perform some functions here. And then what I like to do is do set safety off, and I'll show you why. So for example, if we were to import this, right now it doesn't provide, so here it actually provides us a warning language because there's already a .fill file with the same name, and you press yes. So obviously that would be super annoying if you had a huge long script and you had to keep pressing OK. Why don't you do set safety off? So we're going to copy this into the command line, run it, and then try to import it again. Okay, in this case it's open, so we actually can't do it. Actually can't import it, so let's close it. But if I were to go here, you'll see that there is no warning error that pops up. So really great to use. Set exact on. So set exact on is super important as well, and I'll show you why. Say for example, in this credit card number, or even this employee ID, I only wanted the these numbers are not the greatest one, but let's say for example I only want to find the employee IDs that that had 008, and what you'll see here is that it doesn't actually search it exact. This is actually not the greatest example. Let me see if I can find one. What I'm trying to look for is where someone's name is a subset of someone else's name. Okay, perfect. Here's a great example. So if I were to click on right click Eliza, in this case, so let me see if I set exact off. Okay, no, it's because those names are similar. Okay, let's see if we can find one. And there may not be one in this data, so we may have to try a different data set. Okay, here you go. Will. If I were to right click Will, what you'll see here, if I don't have exact on, is that it will then pull in everything that also contains the subset of that. So if it started with Will, it'll also pull that. And sometimes you want to do that, but to be honest, it's pretty unlikely where you would want to search exactly something and then it would come up with everything with the prefix. And this happens with numbers as well. If you, on the most common cases, if you have an employee number that's 4 and then an employee number that's 40, then it can be really annoying. So, but what you'll see here, if you have set exact on, is it will only search that exact text. So really underrated, super important. So good. Okay, perfect. And then what we're gonna do here is we're gonna go set folder 2, and then that will basically ask you, tell ACL to create the folder. And we're gonna go slash. We're gonna go table. So tables slash underscore source, and that's just for me to know that these are source files. So once you have that typed out, I like to run it again. And this is a little bit more of a best practice, but here it actually provides you the source of where it saved the .fill file. But ACL is smart, like many other programs, and it will automatically determine what file folder to go to based off of where the actual ACL project is saved. So what I like to do is I like to delete all that file path because I know I'm going to save it on the same folder level as the ACL project. And it just makes it look a lot cleaner. And as well, if you were to pass this script package off to someone else, they could also run it because it'll be based off of where the ACL project is, as opposed to if you left it, it's going to try to look for where it has the same username as mine, which is pretty unlikely that someone would have, unless you're in my family, I suppose, to have the same file format path. So let's leave that. So perfect. Now we're at ACL. So if you want to see all the lines, so you'll see here, you have to scroll over to see all the ACL stuff. If you want to see everything, you just click on this Wordwrap and it wraps it. I personally like Wordwrap, but it can also be a little bit confusing if you're starting out with ACL. So I'll let you decide how you want to view it. But let's import a couple other file formats quickly. So let's go right click new, table, go through the next. So I'm gonna go through this next part. So here it's gonna open up the dialog box again. So let's go to data. Let's import now the acceptable codes database. So we're gonna right click the access database, and here access database is probably the least most customizable one. So go next, and it's actually the slowest what I find when it comes to importing. It can take sometimes several hours to import even just a couple 100,000 lines. So here it's going to ask you for the table. In this case, there's only one. It asks you for the maximum character field lengths and the maximum memo field lengths. So obviously this is up to you, but I recommend increasing it depending on what kind of data that you have. So in this case, I know acceptable codes is going to work, but if you have, say for example, journal entries and you have journal entry descriptions, oftentimes people can write quite a bit when they're to their journal entries. So I'm going to click on next, and it's going to ask you to save your file format. So hopefully everyone remembers, never save it in the data folder. I should create a t-shirt with that and post a picture with it, but hopefully you remember. So we're going to call it underscore acceptable codes, and we're going to save it. And then here, so you see right here, they didn't give us any options. They automatically made codes numeric, which is actually not correct. They made description, ASCII. They didn't ask us for any details. It automatically just pulled in whatever the file formats are in your Access database. So I don't recommend getting Access databases. I prefer getting text files. So we're going to save this to our script, and we're going to go to the next line, and then as well we're going to eliminate this area here. Okay, cool. So I would say Excel files are probably one of the most common ones you're going to run to when you start out, but really the file format that you actually want are either mostly text files, just because you'll find that you can control the delimiter. So we're going to go here, go data, and we're going to go down to unacceptable codes. So we're going to double click here, go next. In this case, it actually asks you for other file format. So what we're going to try to do is try to default to this one, just because maybe the view on the file, but we're going to try to do delimited text file and see what happens here. So here it looks kind of messed up. It doesn't look like it's going to work out. But if we actually go to tab here, what you'll see here, so actually let me go through, I'll leave it to where it was before. So a couple of the things, it's going to ask you what line to start in. In this case, we're going to start at 1. I almost never change the ones up here. What we're going to do here is we're going to go to use first row as field names, because clearly the field name's here. It's going to ask you what your field separator is. So if it looks like here and it looks like there's no clear separator, there's not a comma, not a semicolon, it looks weird. Like what I normally do is I go to tab, and then what you'll see here, it'll preview to what the preview of what the data will look like. So it looks like here, looks like it's actually done it correct. So it looks like it is tab delimited. So double quote, single quote, none, other. So this is called what we call text qualifiers. So when you export out of a SQL database or out of any like MySQL database, it gives you the option, one, to define the delimiter, which is the field separator. I don't know why they wouldn't call it delimiter, but regardless, I guess field separator makes it a little bit more intuitive. And then you have the text qualifier. Basically, what it allows you to do is then put quotes, single quotes, or whatever the file format to actually also act as a separator between the fields, which actually is really helpful, because the problem is if you have it for commas, sometimes your data will have commas in it. So common one is like if you have addresses in the field, oftentimes that has commas as well. So if you export that in CSV without the text qualifier, what we'll then do is they'll then break the data and break it into separate columns when you really don't want it to, because sometimes the address field will have a comma and sometimes it won't. So having these text qualifiers is actually usually pretty helpful. But in this case, it actually doesn't matter because there are no text qualifiers. So I'm just going to click double quote. We're going to go next. It's going to ask you to save it to the right file format. In this case, it actually picked the right one. So we're going to click on unacceptable codes here. And then what you'll see here is the text file format. Well, the reason why I like it is that it actually gives you the most options. So here, again, gives you the name, column title. In this case, it's making it numeric. But in this case, what you'll see here, you're going to see a whole bunch of different options. The ones that you're going to use most are going to be ASCII text, numeric formatted or unformatted. So we're going to cover this in a future lesson, but it doesn't really matter right now between formatted and unformatted. The only thing is if your data doesn't come formatted, i.e. doesn't include the decimal places. Like, for example, your data is not in dollars, it's in cents, then obviously you want to use unformatted. And then, so numeric and then date time are probably the ones that you're going to use the most. These other ones I've almost never used, but you can use it. If you're using Unicode, don't use ASCII, use Unicode. But in this case, I'm going to use ASCII text. And its description, I'm going to leave it as is as well. And you click on next, and then it provides you another quick preview. So if you made a mistake, you can always go back and then redo it. So in this case, it's done it correctly. So we're going to right click there, and then you're going to see the preview. And what you can do here is then copy and paste that code. I know some of the years are gonna ask you like, okay, after you've imported, can you? So in this case, it actually didn't. So you'll see here, import Excel, import Access, import Delimited. So some of you are gonna ask if I imported, for example, employee number wrong, and I want to change it from character to numeric or vice versa. Can I change it in ACL? The answer is yes, and I'm going to show you a way that I really don't recommend, but I'm going to show you just so that you have the knowledge. You click on this table layout, and here what you can do is go to, for example, employee number, and actually change the type that you want to use. I really don't recommend that method. What I really recommend for you to do is, the reason why is because when you import it again, it's going to make the same mistake. So what I recommend you first to do is, if you're not familiar with reading this code, you're not comfortable yet, I recommend you just to go through that re-import. If you are comfortable with reading it, and I'm going to walk you through quickly because I know this is a longer video than I want it to be, but what you're going to see here is we're going to walk through the Excel one first. So this is the table name that you want to show up here. This is the .fill file, which is basically, if we go to ACL, what you'll see here is then that's the name of the background file, and then where it's from. So it's always going to default it to the path that you're in. Then it's going to go data, and it's going to import this Excel document. And then obviously then if you have a very similar file but with a slightly different name, then you can just change it here and use as an import. And it's going to ask you what the table name is, so that what is the sheet name that you actually want to import. So don't forget to include the $sign. It's going to keep this function called keep title, which basically means is the first row of the title. And then it's going to basically go through each field. And so in this case here, it's going to be the name of the field, followed by what kind of character is it. So it's either a C, which is like a text file, an N, which is a numeric, or D, which is a date. We're going to see examples of each one. So width is always going to be included in all of them. So how wide is the field? So if you made it too short or made it too long, you can adjust it here. And then as quotation, you always have that. And then it goes on to the next field. But let's go to numeric, which is going to be very similar, except for slightly different. So here with salary, so it's going to go salary, and then it's going to N. It's going to ask you for the width. Then it's going to ask you the number of decimal places. Then as quotation. Then dates are very similar. So here, so you have the field name, the date. So in this case is the D, the width, the pick, which is basically the input mask, as quotation. So you see it's pretty, even though it's pretty long, you can actually go in here and adjust it pretty quickly. So for example, I want to change employee number to a numeric. I'm just going to change this to an N. And I know I have to add the decimal places. I'm going to make it decimal places with 0 decimal places. So if I were to run this again, so what I have here is now employee number is numeric with 0 decimal places. So you can see how quick and easy that is versus even just going into the table format and changing that. But I'm going to change that back. Oh, nope. Looks like I commented one too many out. So there you go. Perfect. And then I'm going to walk you through the access one. It's going to be very similar. Unfortunately, there's not really that many options. So import access to whatever the table you want to call it, the .fill file, which is background, where you imported it from, the table that you imported, the chart max, memo max. Really, that's all you can do with an access database, unfortunately. Excel used to be like that as well in I think 9.1. So that was back in 2009. Depends on how old you are. That may seem like a long time ago, or it may seem pretty recent. For me, it seems pretty recent. Import delimited here. So this is going to be very similar to Excel. It's going to ask you here from the separator. So in this case, it's a tab separator. If it was something else, you would see quotation, the separator, the qualifier. So in this case, it's double quote. So if there wasn't a text qualifier, then you would see there. Consecutive start line, don't worry about that one. It's almost always the same. Keep title, very similar to Excel. The field name, the type, so C, N, or D. At, it asks you like where do you want to start within the file format. In this case, it's always gonna have a decimal, like number of decimals, even if it's a character, which makes sense or it doesn't make sense. The width, the pick, and this, so it always includes the width, pick, and decimal places, even if it's a character. Then the same thing with, and then it goes as quotation. So relatively simple once you actually break down the different components. So I know that's kind of a long video. So hopefully you've learned how to actually import the files. In this case, we covered an Excel file, we covered an Access database, and we covered a tab delimited text file. In another lesson, a separate lesson, I'm going to show you actually how to import a PDF and report format. And actually, ACL 11 actually has done a lot of really great work and a lot of really great improvement to make that process even easier. So until next time, I look forward to speaking to you next. Thank you.